The storm raged like a furious beast, its howls tearing through the night, as if nature itself were wrestling with something dark and hidden. Thunder cracked across the sky, and a heavy downpour transformed the streets into rivers. But amidst the chaos, something extraordinary was about to unfold. In the heart of Fairview, a small, quiet town clinging to the edge of the wilderness, Dr. Sarah Matthews rushed through the rain-slicked entrance of Fairview General Hospital. The power had gone out in half of the town, and the emergency lights flickered in the hallways as the backup generators struggled to keep up. Lightning illuminated the parking lot, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the building. Dr. Matthews, you need to see this, came the voice of Jenny, the night nurse, her words urgent and full of disbelief. Welcome to HeartForce channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Sarah followed Jenny through the dim corridor to the emergency side entrance, her heart already racing from the intensity of the storm. And then she saw it, a German shepherd, soaked to the bone, standing vigil outside the door. Its graying coat glistened in the dim light, its eyes sharp, focused. At the dog's feet lay a small bundle, wrapped tightly in a pale blue blanket. He's been sitting here for 10 minutes, not letting anyone near, Jenny whispered. Her voice hushed, as if afraid to disturb the scene. As Sarah approached, the dog's intelligent eyes met hers, studying her with an intensity that felt almost human. She knelt slowly, her heart pounding as she examined the bundle. What she saw next would change everything. A tiny infant, no more than a few hours old, lay in the blanket. The baby was pale and cold, shivering in the night air, barely clinging to life. A small, distinctive birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon, marked the child's right shoulder. Sarah's pulse quickened. She had seen that mark before, but where? The German shepherd, still alert and watchful, stepped aside, allowing Sarah to lift the baby. As if approving her actions, the dog's tail gave a single, faint wag. It watched every movement she made, unwavering, like a silent guardian. "Give me warming blankets," Sarah called out to the nurses inside. "And call Dr. Niku. We need to stabilize this baby now." But as they rushed the baby inside, something else caught Sarah's attention. A note, hastily folded and tucked into the blanket. She opened it quickly. The handwriting was shaky, urgent. "His name is Oliver. Please protect him." As Sarah read the note, she felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't explain why, but something told her this wasn't just a random act of fate. There was a connection here, a deeper meaning she couldn't yet grasp. Outside the treatment room, the dog remained. Despite the staff's attempts to usher it away, the German shepherd refused to leave its post. Its eyes never strayed from the baby inside. Through the storm's fury, Sarah caught a glimpse of something strange outside the hospital. Dark figures, standing motionless in the rain, their faces obscured. And when lightning flashed again, they were gone. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this night, this storm, had brought her something more than just a broken, abandoned child. She could feel it in the air. Something was unfolding, and it was bigger than any of them realized. But what she didn't know was that the storm was only the beginning. The days that followed the storm were filled with uncertainty. But one thing remained clear. The baby, Oliver, was not just a child in need of care. He was a part of something much larger. Sarah's heart had already begun to stitch itself into the fabric of his tiny life. She felt an undeniable pull, like a connection between them that she couldn't explain. The storm had brought Oliver to her, and she knew she couldn't let him go. Max, the aging German shepherd, remained at the hospital. Every night, he sat by the door, steadfast and unyielding, as though he was guarding something precious. His eyes never left the baby, and his posture was that of a soldier on duty. No one could dismiss him, not even the security staff, who had tried and failed to coax him away. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this dog, with his graying coat and unwavering loyalty, wasn't just any stray. Max had a history. She could see it in the way he carried himself, the way he protected Oliver without question. It wasn't until she dug deeper into the records that she realized how profound his presence truly was. 5 years ago, Max had been a prize member of the Fairview Police Department's K-9 unit. His reputation was legendary. Not only was he known for his sharp instincts and exceptional intelligence, but he was also a hero. During a fire at Henderson Manor, Max had ignored orders to wait for backup and had charged straight into the burning building, following the scent of a trapped woman. Despite his own injuries, Max had carried Elizabeth Henderson out of the inferno just moments before the floor collapsed. Elizabeth, 8 months pregnant at the time, had survived, and Max had been hailed as a hero. But the bond between them ran deeper than any accolades. Elizabeth had visited him daily while he recovered, talking to him about her fears, her hopes, and the child she carried. But there was something more, something unspoken between them that neither of them fully understood at the time. 3 months later, when Max's handler was killed in the line of duty, Elizabeth took matters into her own hands. She adopted Max, giving him a new purpose in life. Together, they would continue to protect the community, but their connection was different. Elizabeth had trained Max in ways no one else could. She had taught him not just to obey commands, but to understand distress, to recognize danger, and to know who needed protection, even when they didn't ask for it. Over the years, Max became more than just a police dog. He became a silent guardian of Fairview. He patrolled the streets, watched over the elderly, and even followed children to school, always from a distance. But he was there, like a shadow, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. The townspeople had grown accustomed to his presence, but few understood the depth of his loyalty and his sense of purpose. And then Elizabeth disappeared. Without warning, she left the town, leaving only a note behind. "Trust Max. He knows what to do," it read. The town assumed she had run away. But Max never stopped. He continued his patrols, maintaining the same vigilant routine. But there was one place he always returned to: Henderson Manor. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and power, had been abandoned for years. But Max, despite his aging body and increasing stiffness, never stopped visiting. It was as if he was waiting for something, someone. And when Sarah Matthews, the quiet doctor, moved into the town, Max began to visit her, too. He never stayed long, but he always stopped by. No one could explain why. But Max seemed drawn to her solitude, to her quiet strength. Sarah had never tried to capture him or force him to stay. She simply left out fresh water and occasionally spoke to him. And though she never knew why, she felt a connection to this dog, this silent guardian who had been watching over the town long before she arrived. The truth, however, was more complicated than she could have imagined. Elizabeth had seen something in Sarah from the beginning, something that made her trust this doctor with her most precious secret, her son, Oliver. Elizabeth had chosen Sarah long before the storm had brought Oliver to her doorstep. It was in Sarah that Elizabeth saw the same spirit of protection, the same fierce dedication to saving others that had defined her own family for generations. Now, with Oliver in Sarah's care, Max's mission was clear: protect the child at all costs. The days passed quickly, each one marked by the quiet rhythm of Sarah's life with Oliver and the watchful presence of Max. But the sense of unease never fully left her. As much as she wanted to believe that everything had fallen into place, that she had finally found a sense of belonging, there was something beneath the surface that kept her on edge. Sarah had been through enough in her life to know that peace was often fleeting. In her heart, she knew this would not be an easy road. Max's presence gave her comfort, but also brought with it a weight. The dog had watched over the town for years, guarding secrets, protecting lives. And now, he was watching over Oliver. It wasn't until a particularly tense night shift that Sarah began to piece together more of the mystery surrounding Oliver, Max, and the town of Fairview. She was alone in the hospital when an elderly woman, Claire Thompson, approached her. The librarian had been watching over Sarah from afar for years. keeping a close eye on the quiet doctor who had been struggling with the ghosts of her past. "Dr. Matthews," Claire said, her voice soft but full of urgency. "I've been meaning to show you something." Claire handed Sarah a dusty photo album, its pages worn with age. Inside, there were faded pictures of the Henderson family. The very family whose legacy seemed to have woven itself into Sarah's life in ways she couldn't understand. But what caught Sarah's attention wasn't just the family's well-to-do appearance or the glamorous smiles in the photographs. It was a birthmark, a crescent-shaped mark on the shoulder of a young Elizabeth Henderson. The same birthmark that was on Oliver's shoulder. "I've seen this birthmark before," Claire said, her voice trembling. "It's the same one, the one on Oliver." Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. The pieces were falling into place, though slowly, too slowly. She flipped through the pages, each one revealing more about the Henderson family. The family had long been known for their wealth and influence. But what most people didn't know was that they had also run a secret network of protectors. The Hendersons were guardians not just of their own legacy, but of anyone in need. But why had Elizabeth disappeared? And why had she trusted Sarah with her son? As Sarah looked at the pictures, she began to understand. The Henderson legacy wasn't just about money or power. It was about protection. It was about choosing to help others, to safeguard the vulnerable, no matter the cost. It was the same spirit that had drawn Elizabeth to Thomas Carter, the young doctor who had shared her passion for helping the downtrodden. It was the same spirit that had led Sarah to fight for every patient, no matter how dire the situation. The storm that had brought Oliver into her life had been the catalyst for something greater. Sarah had always believed that the choices we made, the people we chose to care for, defined who we were. And now, she was standing at the edge of a much larger world, a world where the stakes were higher than she ever imagined. As Sarah sat in her quiet apartment that night, she stared at the photo album. Oliver slept soundly in his crib nearby, and Max lay curled up at her feet. For the first time, Sarah truly understood the weight of her responsibility. She wasn't just taking care of a baby. She was continuing a legacy, the Henderson legacy. But that legacy came with enemies. The Blackwoods, a wealthy couple from Boston, had recently filed for emergency custody of Oliver, claiming they could provide him with a stable, traditional home. Their intentions were clear. They didn't want Oliver for the child he was. They wanted him for what he represented. The birthmark, the Henderson legacy. Sarah had seen the Blackwoods kind before. People who used money and power to control others. And though they had put up a facade of being respectable, something about them didn't sit right with her. They didn't care for Oliver as a child. They saw him as a key to something much larger, a legacy they didn't understand. One evening, as Sarah returned home from her shift, she found Max pacing restlessly by her front door. He was agitated, his eyes darting around the street as if something was wrong. When Sarah opened the door, Max bolted past her, his body moving with a speed that belied his age. "Max, wait," she called, but the dog was already gone, disappearing into the night. Worried, Sarah followed him. She knew he wouldn't run without reason. The old German shepherd led her to the outskirts of town, where she saw a shadowy figure standing in the distance, hidden beneath the trees. She couldn't make out any details, but she knew the person wasn't just a passerby. This was someone who had been watching her, and she wasn't sure why. Max stood firm, his tail stiff, eyes locked on the stranger. Sarah felt a chill run through her. The connection between the dog, the baby, and the mysterious figure was undeniable. Then, in the silence, she heard a whisper, a voice that carried through the trees. "It's time." The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She didn't understand who was speaking or what they meant, but somehow, she knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever the Blackwoods were planning, they were getting closer, and she had no idea what they would do to get what they wanted. The tension in Fairview was palpable. The custody battle for Oliver had reached a boiling point. Sarah Matthews, the quiet doctor who had unknowingly become the center of a battle for the future of a legacy, was now fighting for her right to protect a child she had come to love as her own. And standing at her side was Max, the aging German shepherd whose loyalty had never wavered, whose watchful eyes seemed to know what was coming even before Sarah did. Max had always been a protector. His years as a canine officer had trained him for this. He had known danger, had faced it head-on with the kind of courage that most people couldn't comprehend. And now, as Sarah prepared for the most important battle of her life, Max's protective instincts were more alive than ever. The Blackwoods, a wealthy couple from Boston, had submitted a petition for emergency custody of Oliver. They had the resources to fight, and they had powerful connections. But Sarah had something they couldn't buy, a community that stood with her, and a dog who had always known what it meant to protect. As the days passed, Sarah grew more determined. The Blackwoods had painted her as unfit to care for Oliver. Focusing on her past mistakes, her emotional attachment to the baby, and her unconventional lifestyle, they were trying to use her history against her. But Sarah knew better than anyone how quickly everything could be turned around. She had been through the worst before, and she wasn't going to let her past destroy her future. Sarah's resolve was strengthened by the people around her. The town of Fairview, a town that had once been silent, was beginning to wake up. The residents, who had always known Max as a guardian in their own lives, were now rallying to Sarah's side. They were standing up against the Blackwoods and the corruption they represented. The quiet whispers that had once been reserved for gossip in the local diner were now powerful voices, calling for justice. They weren't just supporting Sarah, they were protecting a way of life. They were protecting a legacy of compassion, a legacy built not on power or control, but on the simple act of choosing to care for others when no one else would. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Sarah found herself walking the quiet streets of Fairview. She had just received word that the Blackwoods legal team was pushing harder than ever. They were digging into her past, trying to use every mistake she'd made to paint her as unfit. The stress was wearing on her, but Sarah couldn't afford a break. She had made a promise to Oliver, and to herself. She would not let him go. Max, as always, was by her side, walking silently beside her, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. The old dog had been with her through everything, his presence a constant source of strength. As they walked, Sarah saw something in the distance, a shadow moving through the trees. Max's ears perked up, his body going tense, and Sarah followed his gaze. There, just beyond the line of streetlights, stood the same figure she had seen weeks ago, the one who had been watching her. The man stood still, his back to her, as if he knew she was approaching. But he didn't move, didn't try to hide. Something about him felt different now. The first time she had seen him, he had been distant, like a shadow. But now, he seemed purposeful. Max, sensing Sarah's unease, began to growl low in his throat. His body was poised, ready for anything. "Who are you?" Sarah called out, her voice steady but laced with a growing sense of urgency. The man turned slowly, his face partially illuminated by the streetlight. As his features became clearer, a chill ran down Sarah's spine. His eyes, so much like Oliver's, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. It was a look she couldn't quite place, a look that spoke of long-hidden secrets and untold stories. "I'm Thomas," the man said, his voice soft yet filled with a quiet authority. "I've been waiting for you." The words hit Sarah like a tidal wave. She hadn't expected this, didn't even know what to make of it. Thomas. The name felt like a key, unlocking something deep within her, something she hadn't known was there. But Max's growl, still rumbling in his chest, told her there was more to this encounter than met the eye. "Why are you here?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper, afraid that if she spoke too loudly, the moment might slip away. Thomas stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've been watching over you and Oliver. I'm his father." The confession was like a punch to the gut. Sarah had suspected there was more to Oliver's story than just the mysterious note, but hearing it out loud shook her to her core. This man, this stranger, was Oliver's father? The same child she had sworn to protect? Max's growl turned into a bark, sharp and commanding, and Sarah knew that this was a turning point. She needed answers, but she needed to be cautious. "Where is Oliver's mother?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempts to remain composed. Thomas's face softened, and his eyes, filled with sorrow, never left hers. "She's gone, but she left something for you, a legacy. You're part of that legacy now. She trusted you to protect Oliver." As Sarah absorbed his words, she felt something deep within her stir, a recognition. She had always believed that she was meant to care for Oliver. But now, it seemed as though everything she had done, every choice she had made, had led to this moment. Max, still alert, took a step forward, his posture protective as he positioned himself between Sarah and Thomas. But Thomas didn't flinch. He seemed to understand the dog's role, the bond between them, as if he had known all along. "You'll need to be strong," Thomas said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "The Blackwoods aren't the only ones interested in Oliver. There are others, people who want him for what he represents." As if on cue, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. Sarah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. She wasn't just fighting for Oliver anymore. She was fighting for the truth. The courtroom buzzed with tension, a storm of emotions that swirled in the air as Sarah Matthews stood before the judge, clutching Oliver in her arms. Max, though weakened from his injuries, was by her side, his head held high with the same fierce determination he had shown for years. It was the final custody hearing, the moment that would decide not only Oliver's fate, but the future of a legacy that had been passed down through generations. Sarah knew the odds were stacked against her. The Blackwoods had brought their full force to bear, their high-powered lawyers ready to attack her at every turn. But this time, she wasn't alone. The community that had once been silent was now standing strong behind her, united in their support. The Blackwoods attorney, a man with a sharp suit and a sharp tongue, stood before the judge with an air of confidence that made Sarah's stomach churn. He had already painted her as unstable, unfit to raise Oliver. He had dredged up her past, the wrongful dismissal from Boston Metropolitan, the accusations of emotional instability, and tried to use it as ammunition. Every word was a blow, every accusation a weight that pressed down on her shoulders. But Sarah refused to break. She had already lost so much in her life, but she was determined not to lose Oliver. The attorney turned to the judge, a woman with hard eyes and a stern face. "Your Honor, Dr. Matthews' past is riddled with instability. She is unfit to care for a child like Oliver. We have a stable home, the resources, the support. Oliver deserves a life free from the turmoil of Dr. Matthews' personal history." Sarah clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms. She knew it was coming. The Blackwoods had a plan, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But Sarah had something they didn't have. She had Max, and she had the truth. When it was her turn to speak, Sarah stood tall, despite the weight of the world on her shoulders. She held Oliver close, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. "I understand what it means to be abandoned," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I was once left in a hospital, a baby with no name, no family. But I was given a chance. I was raised by people who chose to love and protect me, even when I had nothing to offer. I didn't have wealth, I didn't have status, but I had people who cared for me. And now, I'm doing the same for Oliver." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The judge's eyes softened, just slightly, as she listened. But the Blackwoods weren't finished yet. They had brought in experts, child psychologists, social workers, all to testify that Sarah's unconventional lifestyle made her unsuitable to raise a child. They painted Max as a danger, claiming that the dog's presence in her home was a threat to Oliver's safety. They used every weapon they could find to undermine her. But Sarah didn't waver. She didn't have to. She had the truth on her side. Then, just as the Blackwoods lawyer prepared to speak again, a new voice interrupted the proceedings. It was Thomas Carter, Oliver's father. His entrance was met with stunned silence. He had stayed in the shadows for so long, watching from a distance, but now he stepped forward, his voice steady and strong. "Your Honor, I've been watching over my son," Thomas said, his gaze never leaving the judge. "I've been gathering evidence, documenting the Blackwoods' attempts to take Oliver for their own gain. They don't care for him. They care for what he represents. The Henderson legacy is not about wealth or control. It's about protecting others. Sarah Matthews has proven that she understands that legacy. She is the guardian my son needs, and she has earned the right to raise him. The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone like a heavy fog. Sarah's heart raced, and she felt a surge of hope. Thomas had finally come forward, and his testimony was the final piece of the puzzle. With his words, the Blackwoods' carefully constructed facade began to crumble. But there was still one final piece of the puzzle to reveal. As Sarah watched, Max slowly walked to the front of the courtroom, his body stiff and weary, but his spirit unwavering. The old dog's eyes were fixed on the Blackwoods' lawyer, his body language firm and protective. He had always known his purpose, and now he was showing the world exactly what it meant to be a guardian. The Blackwoods' lawyer, seeing Max's approach, stepped back, his bravado faltering. Max's presence was undeniable. He had been a silent protector of Fairview for years, watching over its residents, keeping them safe. And now, he was standing beside Sarah, ready to protect her and Oliver from anyone who would try to take them away. The judge looked down at the scene before her, her expression unreadable. "I have heard enough," she said, her voice firm. "This court will adjourn for the day. I will make my decision tomorrow." As the courtroom emptied, Sarah, Thomas, and Max stood together. The weight of the battle was far from over, but for the first time, Sarah felt like they were winning. The community had come together to support her, and the truth was on their side. No one could take that away. Later that night, as Sarah sat by Max's side, she reflected on everything that had led her to this moment. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn, that she would find herself at the center of such a monumental fight. But she had also never imagined how much she was capable of. She had always believed in the power of love and protection, and now she was living that truth every day. Max, the faithful dog who had watched over Fairview for so long, had proven that sometimes the most powerful guardians don't come in human form. They come in the form of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. As Sarah looked down at Oliver, sleeping peacefully in her arms, she knew that no matter what happened in the courtroom, she had already won. She had found her family, and together they would protect each other, no matter the cost. This story teaches us that true guardianship is not defined by bloodlines or status, but by the choices we make to protect and care for others. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. Sarah's journey reminds us that resilience and compassion are our greatest strengths, and that love and loyalty can create a family stronger than any force that tries to tear it apart. What did you think of this story? How does it inspire you to protect those you love and stand up for what's right? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the HeartForce channel for more inspiring stories about love, loyalty, and guardianship.